standalone novels, sort of other stuff like dog tripping, and now this is your fourth canine mystery. Are you exhausted just thinking about it?
Sounds like a lot. It really does.
So David was here for his very first book. We've been together through his entire career. Much of it.
Amazing how many times I've been here.
It really is, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
And we are so pleased that the Golden Rescue Society has once again brought us some Goldens, making you feel right at home, right?
Yep. We found out today we're getting 2 more.
Are these are all rescues? I thought you said when you moved to Maine that the rescue dog business kind of went downhill.
It has. In New England, there's no rescue problem. And we're down to 12 dogs right now.
No.
Yeah. But we're getting 2 more. We just found out today 2 Goldens that owner had to give up. The owner and the husband who was left can't take care of the dogs.
So if you were still in California, you'd probably have a much bigger presence.
Yeah, it's a whole different world. We'd still be completely limited. So we'd have 35. Southern California. So.
So I don't know if some of you may have heard me say this, but we adopted a rescue dog sometime back. And she's,
Excuse me.
and it was a kind of a, what's the word I want? Anyway, at a shopping center near us, so it wasn't like an official, rescue group. But anyway, there they were with this adorable dog. And we asked about her history. Subsequently, we did a DNA test and discovered what her background was. But anyway, we said, where'd she come from? And they said, we don't know. They said, she's from Southern California. And I said, okay. And they said, well, that's the reverse. See, they said, because normally what happens is all the big dogs rescued in Southern California are driven to Phoenix, and all the purse-sized dogs from Phoenix are driven to Southern California, which I thought said a lot about, how dog rescue might work.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad for all dogs in Southern California, but the little ones can get placed much more easily than the big.
In the fancy persons, like, for example, if you had a baby bang or, a Birkin with a dog would be like the ultimate thing. I don't know how Jane Birkin ever got to be an icon in the purse industry, but so it is. Anyway, Canine, why did you decide to write that sort of offshoot of the Andy Carpenter books?
Wanted to sell more books. I wrote a lot of standalones with new characters, and they didn't do as well as the Andy Carpenters because I'm known as the dog author, the dog guy. So I figured why fight it. I'm lazy, so I didn't have to create all new characters. I just had to create one new character, and so I like it. It's it's comfortable.
So David's always kind of deprecating about his talents as an author, but I have to tell you that I think he could have been a career criminal. But he really has the most inventive mind. And this book, I really wish we could really talk about it. This book has a really amazing plot. Very, very clever. I thought it was one of your better ones. My husband's home rapidly reading the end of it as I am down here talking to you.
I should have skimmed it before I came here.
That's because you're already too close up, right? You can't remember. Well, that's my job. My job is to be here and tell David what his book is about. You can enjoy it. But I really like the cast in the Canine series because we get more of a role for Simon Garfunkel. Is everybody, those of you who read it, is Simon Garfunkel your favorite?
Yes.
So for those of you who don't know Simon Garfunkel, surely you can remember this.
Say again, I'm sorry.
Surely you can remember
Oh, yes,
Simon Garfunkel.
yes, Simon Garfunkel, who was named that way because I did for a rescue auction the right to be named as a character in a future book, and the dog's name was Simon Garfunkel. So, and I liked it, so I used it, and he's a police dog. And he and his owner, partner, retired from the police force at the same time. And they started, and they hooked up with Laurie and Marcus, 2 of the other characters, and they formed a K team to investigate crimes. The only real difference between that and the Andy Carpenter books is it's Corey's voice, not Andy's. Although I sometimes have a tendency to blend the two. And there's no trial, which makes it harder for me. because the trial eats up with like 70 pages usually, and
So
you know
what
it's easy for me to write witness stuff and you know that kind of stuff.
are you a walking manual on court procedure? Come on, I studied it for 3 years in order to take the bar exam, and you just make it up.
I just wing it. I totally wing it.
So you would never call the Andy Carpenter books legal thrillers in the proper sense of the word, right?
Whatever I learned, I got from the O.J. Simpson trial.
And so could we also assume that your grasp of actual police work is pretty
Zero.
loose?
Compared to my knowledge of police work, I'm a brilliant lawyer.
But I do like the way that he always tells the stories in a straightforward, investigative way. They start in one place and they move forward logically towards a conclusion, which is one reason I like procedurals. I really like private eye novels. I really like police procedurals and legal thrillers.
Yeah, I'm sort of forced to do it that way, which turns out for me to be a good thing because I'm in a first person all the time. It's either Andy or Corey that's talking. So I'm following along with him. He's learning as I'm learning as the readers learn. So it has to go from step to step.
Yeah, but you're not being entirely truthful because sometimes
I never said it was entirely true.
sometimes another voice will. No, we can't. You could, you might want to put that down in case you spill it all
No,
down
yeah.
in front. I've been known to do that. It's really embarrassing to sit up here. But anyway, one of the things you do in the books is that every once in a while we hear, usually from a criminal, we get a chapter or two in a different voice.
Yeah, and there's a story behind that. When I wrote my first book, it was called Open and Shut. It was Andy talking in first person, and it had about 7 third-person scenes. Some of them flashbacks because Andy wasn't there, right? He wasn't at the murder, and if I wanted to show the murder, I had to have it in third person. So I wrote the book, and Warner Books bought it, and my first conversation with my editor, Sarah Ann Freed, right, who was one of the all-time greats, I said to her, she said, "You really love the book, but you have to change it and kill the third-person stuff, because it's a cheat going from back and forth, cheat for the audience." So I didn't know anything, so I said, "Fine." So then about a week later, I'm reading a James Patterson book, and he does it on every other page, right? So I said, "Sarah Ann, James Patterson does it." And she said, "Yeah, but he's a bestseller." But she said it like that's one step below pedophile. So I thought maybe we had different interests, right? So I took it out, and for the first 7 books, I was gone. And then after that, and Sarah Ann unfortunately passed away after the second book, but I finally started doing it again, and my editor at the time was fine with it. So.
Sarah Ann died 20 years ago this year. Do you realize that? I was in Canada when they called me to tell. She was a very dear friend and a wonderful editor, but I still remember sitting there by some waterfall somewhere between Toronto and Montreal and crying quietly.
Yeah, that's right, because the first book was 2002, so I was with her for 1 or 2 books, so yeah.
I'm sorry you didn't get longer.
Yeah, she was terrific.
She was
Really
terrific. Anyway, so we have mostly Corey's voice, occasional criminal elements creep in. Simon Garfunkel doesn't actually get any real lines, does he?
No.
No. And he behaves like a real dog, and I think in this book only once does he actually try to take somebody down, calling upon his police training once again.
Not me.
Can't remember.
No. But I think I usually do at least once.
Right, just to show that he's, because, Tara, the wonder dog in the Andy Carpenter series, rarely, if ever, attacks criminals. So that's why Simon is. Have you ever thought about having a little dog, or do they all have to be?
Oh, there's a little dog in the next
You
book.
do, right?
There's a pug now, it's a permanent character. But there's a little dog is in the next book, which is embarrassingly called Flop Dead Gorgeous. It's
All right, it's the little dog on the cover.
Oh yeah, I like the cover actually, but it's it's cringeworthy, but I like it. But it gave me a chance. It's about a woman Andy went to high school with who became a big Hollywood star, and she has this little dog, and Anyway, she's accused of murder back in Patterson, but it gave me a chance to have Andy go out to California, where I spent a lot of time in my previous life, and he could make fun of LA and the movie business. So I could, I could write like 10 pages of LA jokes without ever having to write anything substantive. So I like that.
So I had a great thought now, it just went south. Thank you for reminding me about the little dog. What's that you say? Come on, read my mind.
Come up with something, Barbara. I'm dying here.
All right. Well, you're not carrying your load. That's for sure.
I've been here 30 times. You just found out I don't carry my load.
Here's my broken foot. Just make sure. All right, so in order for the K-9 team to function, since they're not actually part of the Patterson, New Jersey Police Department, they're
Right.
rather quote consultants, right? They almost always are going to wind up, most of the time, they're going to wind up with a cold case, right? Rather than
Yeah,
an
I had to-
active investigation.
Right. I came up with a way that the Patterson Police Department, which is underfunded, had, for some reason, money in their consultant budget. So they hired the K team to work on cold cases. So it gives me an excuse each time I write a book to have to give them a built-in case.
Yeah, but cold cases are really interesting as you get to go back and, work your way through the history. In this particular case, we have two fresh bodies, or reasonably fresh, but there's a much older case where Susan Avery's husband, is it Susan? Or is it Jimmy Daniels? I'm trying to remember. Anyway, he died a long time ago. He was a policeman, and it's been a cold case, and it's really irked all of the Patterson, New Jersey Police Department that they haven't been able to discover what happened.
Yes, and Corey, as an ex-cop, had a special connection to it, like it was important to him. So they let him choose which case they'd work. So he chose this.
Oh, that's right. There's an actual sort of auction where they present several cold cases, and
Yes.
they wanted him to work one, but Corey said no. The team had decided they were going to work the case of the long dead
Right.
policeman.
And these are really Corey's books. So he gets the main part of it. When it's an Andy Carpenter book, Laurie, I think, is more involved than the others. And in this case, it's Corey's book. We're talking to his voice.
So I now remember what it was I was going to ask you. In the Andy Carpenter cases, the only way to overcome his reluctance to actually work, i.e. practice law, is generally to have a dog. Somehow there's a dog involved that kicks him off. But that doesn't have to be true for the K team, does it?
No, it doesn't. But there's a different need. In the Andy Carpenter books, we have to find an excuse to have a dog on a cover.
Right. Because that's when they started to sell. Whoa, that was when the series took off.
The book
Right.
called Play Dead is the first book that the dog was really integral to the plot. So they put a dog on Golden on the cover, and it sold by my standards, it went crazy. So therefore, from now on, every book has a dog on the cover.
And particularly the Christmas books, because your October books have really cute dogs on the cover, generally the Christmas kind of stuff.
Yes, the title
And
of this
terrible
year's
titles.
Christmas.
All right, so
I thought Scare's Little Yelpers was the worst. But this book coming up is called "'Twas the Bite Before Christmas." Just, but anyway, the KT books have a built-in dog. So there's always a dog on the cover, and there doesn't have to be a dog integral to the
So
story.
it's always Simon Garfunkel on
Yeah.
the cover.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
And usually they add another dog. I think they did it here too. Yeah.
yep, carrying out isn't there a young golden in this book? I think there is a puppy.
I don't think there
Or
is.
maybe it's not.
No,
golden.
it's just the jack.
Just a jacket, or they get, I thought it was a small, well, they blend, right? You seem to have read one recently, so if you,
I started reading this while I was waiting.
if you run into,
It's extraordinary,
run
isn't
into a puppy,
Oh, man.
I haven't read it.
you're gonna love how it winds up. You know, the most frustrating things about doing these conversations is the stuff I really want to talk about, which is how the case develops and how full the ending is. You would all stand up and throw your books at me, so.
We wouldn't have to read it.
Oh, there's that too. You're absolutely right. It was far like, this is really one of David's very best ones. Yeah, you can decide later if you agree with me or not, but I thought it was extremely clever. So despite the fact that you talk about how casual your approach to actually authoring books is. What is it that was it working in Hollywood so long that gave you this natural bent towards grift and murder and all the rest?
There were a few producers I would have liked to. No,
Your mind just works that way?
I actually didn't go towards that at all. I went towards the courtroom. I wanted to write I was writing TV movies after my career, and my career in marketing was most of my time in Hollywood. But after that, I was writing TV movies, and I really wanted to write a TV movie, a legal drama, a legal thriller, and they don't make them. They really don't. And they didn't then, they don't now. So I wrote it as a novel. But it was much more, the courtroom stuff really attracts me, the drama of it, right? I mean, when a verdict is read, there's nothing more dramatic in real life than that. I mean, even the Murtaugh thing the other day, which everybody sort of knew how it was going to end, it's still incredibly dramatic.
It was great television from all
Yeah.
accounts. I
Yeah.
didn't watch
I
it.
didn't
How many
either.
of you watched the Murtaugh trial? Was it really exciting television? No, because we knew how it was going to come out. Pretty much.
I didn't watch it.
Well, we thought the
but I
O.J.
saw the
Simpson
first-
trial people thought they sort of knew
Yeah.
how it would come out, and then surprise.
Well, once the jury came back so fast, it was obvious. But I didn't watch the trial at all. I was traveling a lot of it, but I saw the verdict, and it's just incredibly dramatic. And that's what I was going for.
Okay.
But you know, to write a legal thriller about fraud or writing bad checks or something is just not that exciting. So it has to be more serious crime. So generally,
All right, but when you write your standalones and in the K team, you know, you branch off into various kinds of criminal behavior.
yeah, but they're thrillers. So I mean, there has to be danger. So if there's,
Well, no, I'm not arguing that, but somehow or other you've learned to master that. I mean,
I'm not sure I go for master, but yes, I like. I now like to write that stuff. I really do.
okay, so you're kind of thrown into it.
Yeah. But it's the legal stuff that really appeals to me because of my long history as an attorney.
You don't think marketing for Hollywood is along those lines? All right. So what do you want to tell us about how this book begins, if you can remember?
I have no idea. I mean, how it begins? Well,
There are bodies in the water? Is that a,
what's that?
there's bodies in the
Oh
water?
yeah, the water bombs. Yeah. There was a murder. A cop was murdered, and then a while later, his wife and another cop, a retired cop, were murdered together on a boat, and they weren't sure if it was a murder-suicide. The second set of is the book as boring as I'm making it sound. There are two more deaths on this boat, and one of them, the cop, was Corey's mentor. And he thought of him as a father figure. And they believe that there's a chance that this guy, the mentor, killed the woman and killed himself at the same time. And Corey doesn't believe that's true and wants to set it straight. So he takes that on, and it's related to the first cop's murder. So it becomes two crimes that they're solving at once.
So if you're going to plot a cold case, so to speak, there has to be something that makes it more dangerous and whatever it is happening in the present. So is there generally going to be like a second murder or some kind
Well,
of
that's-
second crime?
Yeah, I don't know if, yes, that's how I feel about it, but I'm not sure that's true. I just can't get away from it. So in other words, even in the Andy books, generally, if it's Perry Mason, he solves the crime and identifies the murderer. I seem to have this need to make it there an ongoing threat. So even though the case is about a murder, there's a bigger conspiracy going on that could, that too often the world's in danger, but that there's still, whatever it is, it's still ongoing. And when you do it with cold cases, it's harder because there's been a time lapse, right? So whatever it has been going on, and now has been going on for years.
Yeah.
So it's awkward to do that, at least for
But
me.
if you want drama, it can't just be
That's right.
shuffling through paper
Right.
in the, police records
Right.
department. And, you can't have a DNA match like the Golden State Killer in every book, you know,
Right.
because that's being done to this. So there's really
Right.
no way around having a new crime, a new
Right.
murder probably,
Right.
in order to bring the cold case to some kind of conclusion.
Exactly. I wish there was, because especially with the Andy books, it feels like it's too formulaic. Like I feel like I'm doing the same thing every time. But there are things involved that I can't seem to get away from. One, that there's an original murder, Andy defends the person's likely innocent, and there's an ongoing conspiracy that's going to cause danger to everybody involved. And I don't know how to get rid of any of those factors.
Yes, but here's the thing you've got to remember. Fans want the books to be exactly the same, but different.
Well, if they want to be exactly the same, I'm their guy.
Mark Green and I were having a big conversation about this 2 weeks ago in regard to Burner, is the Gray Man book. Fans want it to be the same, but different. So you would miss it if he were to, doing what you're expecting him to do, but you want it to be a fresh, within the confines of what the expectations
I hope
are
that's
you have
true.
to do. Well,
But,
no, it is
but
true.
it feels to me like doing the same thing too often. But then I look at like Lee Child, right?
No longer.
And what
Oh, now it's Andrew. But carry on.
I know. And for the first time, I didn't like the last book. It's the first book of his I didn't like. But
The one set here in Arizona?
I forget where they were. But I didn't like it. Where a kid's on the bus for a long time, going to see his father. Anyway.
See, it was the same, but slightly different.
But all the books are
I
like
mean,
that.
not the
Reacher's in a
same.
small town and he sees a crime and, and they're all the same, but different. So I like that.
See, and you were already somewhat disappointed when it didn't follow the formula for your
Anyway, so I worry that the Andy books are too formulaic. That's what,
I can't even take credit for that statement. I wish I could, but finer minds than mine have proposed that that is the secret of the series' success. Which is why Jessica Fletcher is still in Cabot Cove, killing people. A town decimated down to a population of 2. It's still going strong.
yeah, I guess it's true of the Spencer books also. So yeah.
Well, and the Cozy series are very, very much, there's, yeah, but that's what fans, what I think, I might be wrong, but for me anyway, you get invested in the characters, right? You really want to see what's going on. Some of them are disposable. Some of them come into a series book and then, they're murdered or they disappear or they go off to California or whatever. But some of them stick. So that's been true for you, right? That, there are characters who have arrived and then they stay because you like them, readers
Yeah.
like them.
I think I've gotten rid of, not killed off, but got rid of 2 characters.
Oh, you tried valiantly with Lori. I mean, you sent her to exile in Wisconsin. And then you couldn't stand that, so you went and got her
She
back.
came back and she got shot in the thigh. In my finest moment, she almost bled to death from being shot in the thigh. So I wrote that the reason the bullet in the thigh caused so much bleeding is that it severed her carotid artery.
There was a real failure on the copy editor's part on that. But I mean, I really did think when, that when Lori went up to Wisconsin, that you had decided that her cycle in that series was done and you were going to bring in somebody new, but it didn't
No,
turn
you
out
give me
that
too
way.
much credit. Honestly, at the end of Sudden Death, I think it was, the whole book had a backstory of Lori trying to decide whether to go to her hometown and become the police chief in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And they go for a walk at the end of the book. I literally didn't know she was going to leave until I typed the words. Yeah, honestly. And then I didn't know she was going to come back. Andy goes to Wisconsin to handle a case, and I made it up as I went along. I did not have a plan for what was going to be with Lori. I truly didn't.
I think one character we know for sure died is Andy's father, right?
At the beginning of the book.
At the very beginning. He was, if I remember right, you all remember all the way back, Andy's father was alive in the first book, right? And died first.
That was the most embarrassing moment, maybe, of my life.
You mean worse than the carotid artery?
No, worse than when I wrote, they found the victim lying face down on his back. Trying to tell the story quickly. I wrote the Andy book, the first one, and it had at the end, not at the end, they go to a Yankee game, he and his father, and it's a funny scene. They're joking about betting on pitches and so on, and then the father has a heart attack and dies. So the book is coming out, and we lived in California, and there was not anymore, a prestigious bookstore in California called, well, I don't know what it was called. It was in Brentwood. I want to say Dutton's, but I'm not sure. But it was a big time bookstore, and so they invite me for a signing, and they say I should bring family and friends. I didn't have any friends out there or family, so my wife Debbie spread the word, and so like maybe 50 people showed up, 48 friends of Debbie's, and 2 losers who happened to be walking in front of me. So I get there, and they tell me it's going to be a reading. So I quickly look through it, and I decide to read this scene, Yankee Stadium. So I'm halfway through the scene, and I realize in my head I'm going to get choked up at the end when the father dies. So I spend the next 2 pages yelling at myself. What are you, an idiot? Your father didn't die at Yankee Stadium. It has nothing to do with him. He lived in Florida. You never went to Yankee games with him, and you wrote the book. He didn't die. He didn't cry when you wrote the pages. Sure enough, I get to the end, and my voice not only cracks, but it like seriously cracks. Right? And it was humiliating, absolutely humiliating. And it's now 21 years later. If I'm torturing Debbie for any particular reason about anything, she'll say to me, "I'm sorry, but I'm at Yankee Stadium." It's haunted me to this day.
I remember Andy's father. Has everybody read the first book? So Andy's father, as you know, was not necessarily always on the straight and narrow. And at one blow in Yankee Stadium, David solved the problem of how to finance Andy's. I love this phrase. He's professionally retired. That's what Laurie said. So Andy gets to be professionally retired because his dad died. And there was all this money. And Andy, if I remember right, he had a brief moment wrestling with himself or couldn't figure out how to get rid of the money without exposing his dad. Wasn't that it?
It was the money that Andy his father dishonorably earned. He was an honorable man who did one bad thing, and he had all this money. So now we're starting a second book, which is called First Degree, and Sarah Ann thought he should give back the money.
She would have.
What's that? Yeah,
She would have. Yeah. She was a deeply moral person.
Yeah, I needed a editor more to my style. But I disagreed mainly because it gave me a chance to tell jokes about charities coming to Andy to get the money. So I kept in it for that reason, but it turned out to be.
Yeah, but it's been a running joke throughout the entire series that Andy pays for everything. Right?
Yes.
Because of this money, and,
Yes.
and it doesn't wreak any hardship on Andy to do that. So it's been incredibly useful.
Right. It's also useful in that his clients don't have to have money.
Okay. So now I'm going to reveal to you that Sarah Ann and I discussed this problem. As you know, we were really good friends, and I voted for keeping the money.
There you go. Thank you.
You're welcome. It was because it was going to be so amazingly useful if you continued the series. Did you actually intend the first Andy to have a sequel? Because so many times people say, I wrote the book and I thought that was going to be it, and then
I never thought about it either way. I wrote the book in like 5 weeks, and Warner bought it right away, and they bought it with sequels. So now that was the first idea I had of it. Is when they said the original contract included, I think, 3 sequels, but certainly sequels. I didn't even know I wrote a mystery. Literally, I thought it was a courtroom drama. I didn't even know about which, book genres. I was in the movie business. So.
And there are no movie genres?
A legal thriller would be, there's no legal thriller section at the bookstore, right? Well, maybe there is here.
Not, no. It's actually, we don't use any labels at all. We just have a file called fiction.
But anyway, the way I found out it was a mystery is Sarah worked for Mysterious Press. That was the imprint for Warner Books that they gave it to. So that's what told me.
Yeah, that was the mystery arm back
Yeah.
then for Warner
Yeah.
Books, right? And like every other publisher, there have been all kinds of consolidations and changes and so forth. Mysterious Press has actually come back after a long hiatus. And,
Has it?
Yeah.
Still Hachette?
No, it actually is now distributed by W.W. Norton, which is an independent book, but I think it's wholly owned by the Hensley Publications. So it's changed a lot. Right. Anyway, what else do you want to say about the K team?
I've exhausted my knowledge.
Let's talk about Marcus then, because I think Marcus is an incredibly useful character. I blew it because I had a typo when I wrote to you. I said that he was kind of like Hawk in the Spencer series, or like Bubba in the early Dennis Lehanes, except I had a typo and I called him Bubs. So I was hoping Dennis wasn't actually reading the newsletter that I sent out. But I'm not. He's incredibly useful because basically we know whenever there's danger, Marcus will ward it up.
I think I probably ripped him off, looking back, but not intentionally, and they're different. Hawk is more, shall I say,
He's
nuanced.
actually more like Bubba. In A Drink Before the War, the original, Dennis Lehane wrote 5 novels set in Boston. And I can't remember, does anybody remember the names of Patrick, do you remember the names of the people in the Dennis Lehanes? It's a series.
Sorry.
Who was A Drink Before the War and the 4 other Dennis Lehanes set in Boston? Do you remember remember Bubba?
Yeah,
Bubba was
yeah.
but do you remember who the detective?
Patrick and Angie.
Patrick and Angie, right? There was a movie actually made with one of the Lehanes. This is all before Mystic River when he changed tax entirely. Which reminds me that Dennis has agreed to sign his April book for us. Only I don't think he's going to actually come here. So I'm putting it into our system. And if you're interested in ordering one, I would recommend doing it early so we don't run out. Anyway, Bubba is a lot more like Marcus, I think.
I never read it, so I couldn't have ripped him off, but I would have been happy to.
You could give a little tip of the hat to those there, see how that worked out.
Yeah.
Right, so Marcus appears in the Andy Carpenter series too, but where did he swim in? Because I can't remember. Does anybody remember when Marcus first appeared?
It was one of the early books, second or third book, and I think Laurie knew him and recommended him.
And he was there to protect Laurie, wasn't he? At the I mean, not
No. I mean, he was there to be an investigator.
okay, but wasn't his bond always with Laurie?
Oh, yes. You know, I sometimes have a tendency to give characters idiosyncrasies instead of real depth. So Marcus, I keep adding things to Marcus, like we find out he really can talk. Right?
Rarely, but he did.
Yeah. You know, he goes to Vegas. He likes classical music. He has a wife who calls him my little Marky. I keep throwing those things in, and eventually he'll be a character.
Actually, in this book, Corey may have found romance. Part of the excitement of this book.
Yeah, I'm not sure where to go with that.
Well, you have a natural tendency for people to get married due to the fact you've been married forever.
Yeah,
So don't you think they might move in it?
I guess.
Probably will.
Yeah.
Yep, right. And then what about Sam the Hacker? Because it's almost impossible today to have a decent private eye series if you don't have somebody who's incredibly gifted.
Sam relates me back to the comment you made about killing off characters, because he almost didn't exist, didn't survive. In the second book, Sam had an assistant, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was the second book or maybe the third. Sam had an assistant, and he was working for Andy also. And Sam dies at like page 80, and I hand the book in, and the it was Sarah Ann or somebody else, really liked that
There
character.
had been Sarah Ann, she was already dead.
It's well, the book came out, I wrote it like a year and a half before, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But anyway, everybody liked Sam as a character, so we decided to have the assistant take the bullet. And Sam survived. Oh, you know what it was? Sam was doing song talking then. It was a thing in some of the early books called song talking, which I really liked and which people seemed to really like. So we kept Sam alive so we could continue that. Then there was a couple of reasons we had to stop that. I think I've told this story before, I don't know about it here, but I stopped the song talking after like 7 books for 2 reasons. First of all, I'm a music dinosaur, so Andy's 35 years old and he's song talking West Side Story, right? It's good. And I mean, I know I've told this, but about 15 years ago now it is, Debbie took me to a Fleetwood Mac concert, and that was the day I found out that that Stevie Nicks was a guy. I thought Stevie Nicks was a guy until that. So anyway, so that was one reason, and the other reason was Carole King's lawyer wrote to me and they were suing me, or they were demanding money for having used her lyrics in a book, and they wanted $10,000. I offered 5, and I spoke to a lawyer friend I know in the music business who said I don't have a leg to stand on. So I offered 5 as a counter, and my agent, unbeknownst to me, who was on the email chain, wrote to this woman, this lawyer, and said, how could you take money from this guy? Every dime he makes goes to animal rescue. And she sent a video that the publisher had done of me with our 35 dogs. And so I didn't hear back for like 3 months. And then finally I hear back from the lawyer replying to my $5,000 counteroffer. And she said she spoke to Carol about this, and their offer was now $1,000, and they would redonate it to us for a rescue. But I don't want to take a chance anymore with less dog-friendly people.
Now, here's the thing, song lyrics and poetry, you can't, and extensive passages from published work, you can't actually just quote it without getting permission, and that also goes in some cases and often for photographs and other stuff, but you can't just randomly do that. You know how authors like to have little bits of poetry in the front or other things. I can't remember the exact rules. I used to know this back when I was a lawyer, but anyway, it has to be very small, or in some cases not at all. And some poets and songwriters and all are more litigious than others.
I didn't even know it was Carole King. I mean, I thought it was James Taylor. I figured out what song it was, but it was one that he sang, and I just used it in like 3 sentences.
Right, so the other character we haven't really talked about is David and, sorry, not David, Andy and Lily's adopted son, Ricky. Right, so what's up with Ricky?
He's a pain in the ass. They have this adopted son, and the problem is once they have a son, you have to account for him. So he has to be somewhere, and they can't both run off to a
Summer
crime scene.
camp. Summer camp at least
He's went to
once.
summer camp, and in this coming book, he's on a teen tour. I'm gonna have to make him a genius. I can go to college at 13. But I think he's added some extra dimension for Andy.
No, it's wonderful. How old is he now?
He's 13.
Yes.
He's aging faster than
everybody else.
Tara in 2002 was 9, and now she's 7. Ricky is aging at a different pace.
How about Sam and Garfunkel?
He's not going to get much older either. He was, I guess he was 9 when he retired, because that's his retirement age. And Andy defended him, maybe he was 8. And Andy got his early retirement for him. But I'm going to have to keep him at that age.
Well, I mean, you can't just substitute one dog for another. That doesn't work out. They're just as distinct in personality.
Spencer did that, right? Didn't the dog die?
Yeah. Pearl. I think we were up to, I'm trying to think, in Ace Atkins' iteration, it may be Pearl number 4. But now Ace is not writing them anymore, and it's all very complicated. The constant swing of people ready
Who's
to
writing
cover.
it now?
I think that Mike Kupika is taking over for Ace, and Reed Farrell Jones and Allison Galen, who will be here in June at some point, yet to be determined, is doing Sunny Randall. So they keep, and then the whole Tom Clancy, there's a constant thing with legacy publishing, which is to say when authors who had series that readers would prefer not to end with the life of the author continues. So there's going to be a whole Tom Clancy reswing. It happened here, it will happen here in May, and then there's another one with Vince Flynn, which will happen here in September, when Kyle Mills hands it over to Don Bentley. And Mark Cameron's handing over Tom Clancy Sr. to somebody here the day after Jack Carr. So it's all, I don't know how, I often
Can you
think
do it
it's
while you're still living?
not general. And I think somebody's taking up Stuart Woods, if I recall, but I can't remember. But in other words, publishers are happy to continue series if there's a sufficient fan base, but it isn't that people always want to stick with writing somebody else's characters in somebody else's universe. So usually they write for a bit and then they cycle out and somebody new comes in. So
Lubick will be good at it.
he will be good at it. He'll be very good at it. He's almost as funny as you are.
I grew up with him as a
course you
sports writer for the Daily News. He's great.
He's very good. I totally agree. Well, how about questions? Because we probably exhausted everything that we don't have to say currently, right? Yes, we do.
So are any of the main characters based on anybody? Loosely or?
I mean, Andy is, his point of view on life is me. But, so if Andy talks about something, makes fun of something, it would be me. But, I'm not a lawyer, and, he's younger, so, that's the closest, and the rest of it, no.
I want to talk for a minute about naming characters, because that money then you use, we've raised quite a lot of money, as I've said, for the Golden Rescue Society, and one way to do it is naming rights, isn't it?
Yeah, it butts heads against my inefficiency. I do that a lot, and then I lose the names, and I'm like trying to get these names in the book. One woman in Mission Viejo paid $9,800 to
Wow.
be named as a character, and I lost her name,
Oh.
and it's never been in a book. And this goes back 15 years. So yeah, sometimes I just did 2 golden events from Delaware Golden Retriever Rescue and Yankee Golden Retriever Rescue in the Northeast. And the 2 auctions combined got $28,000. So it gets a lot. But then I lose the names. So it's,
We write them down and email them to him.
yeah.
It's a more efficient system.
Yeah. No, this one,
But
that's in the.
But then when you've got that, do you, assuming you can remember who it might be, how do you decide which character you're going to apply that name to? Would it ever be, for example, a murder victim?
No, I don't do that. Unless I know the person. I don't
Okay.
do that.
In which case you
It's
might
not,
want
it's not a
to.
victim, and it's usually not a serial killer. I mean, I've done that with people I know. Like people I know have bought names, and I've done that, and I've asked them. But no, there's somebody in this audience actually who was Edna's fiance. No, I
Speaking of
just,
Edna, I forgot about Edna. Are you ever going to retire Edna to Florida?
she's right now on a worldwide hunt for her wedding, her location, destination wedding.
Another person who could be professionally retired.
Yes.
Indeed. Right. Another question? Anybody? No. Come on. We'd like to. Good. Thank you, sir.
So I'm going to change gears a little bit to nonfiction. Lessons from Tara. What's your latest lesson you've learned from your dogs?
Watch where you walk. This time of year, By the way, Lessons from Tara is my favorite book I've ever written, and it was far less successful than any others. I love that book. It's our situation at home. We have, when you go through the doggy door, which is like the size of the Lincoln Tunnel, you go out to an area that's maybe, I don't know, 70 feet square, cement. And then there's a gate that's always open that leads from that out into, I think we probably fenced in about 3 acres of woods. But they also often don't make it out to the woods, and they do their business in the cement area. And what happens in the winter is it gets covered with snow and ice. Then they do their stuff. Then it snows again. Then they do their stuff again, which immediately freezes, and it snows again. It's like this perverse lasagna by spring. Right? It's disgusting. Right? And you dread spring because it's going to melt. So, anyway, sure, it has nothing to do with whatever question you have. Oh, that's what I've learned.
The lesson was watch your feet.
Yeah.
Right. That makes perfectly good sense.
Yeah.
Do you hire machinery to come and kind of break it up?
No, when we first moved there, we bought a snowblower. And I went out to this area once to do it. And it was so disgusting. It was spraying snow and shit everywhere. So,
Oh, was that your phone or mine?
I think Siri just said, I don't know how to respond to that.
I don't have Siri, so it wasn't.
My phone's turned on. Oh, my watch.
What was your watch?
My watch said, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember how much
It's Apple Watch.
technology.
We were in New York recently, and we were walking back from dinner to the hotel, which was about 20 blocks. And halfway through, my watch said to me, "Looks like you're working out." Didn't say, "What have you done with the real David Rosenfelt?" And it was,
Anybody else? All right. For those of you who really love histories with dogs, there is another branch of Macmillan, the overall publisher, that has the Spencer Quinn books. Are you familiar with those? Right. Well, they actually started here at the store because I love the author, Peter Abrahams, and he was writing standalone thrillers for a different company. And I've been doing this long enough when I can tell when the publisher's enthusiasm for an author in a series is largely wound down. So I said to him after the event for that thriller that it might be time to reconsider what he was writing. And so we had a conversation, and the next thing I know, he'd come up with a new name and this wonderful series,
yeah, they're really good, right?
Chet the
Yeah.
Dog. But as a thank you, they're said here. She says unknown to Arizona town, but it's actually Scottsdale. But Spencer, a.a. Peter, has a book called Mrs. Plansky's Revenge coming out this summer. And it's playing into, good news for you here, there's a thing about senior sleuths that has become all of a sudden a thing. Those of you who've been reading mystery a long time may remember Dorothy Gilman and the Mrs. Halifax series. So Deanna Rayburn, whom I'm going to be speaking to tomorrow night about her Veronica Speedwell, did a book last August that was a bestseller. I'm trying to remember what it was called. It had a great cover with a knife on it. But again, it was a group of women, senior women who united.
A certain age.
Thank you, women of killers of a certain age, right? But all of a sudden, because there are these little trends and, publishing and all, there's the whole thing. Maybe it's because they've determined that fans maybe are getting to an age where senior sleuths seem compatible, whatever. So anyway, I'm really looking forward to Mrs. Plansky's Revenge. So I don't think there is a Chet the Dog book coming this summer. I think it's Mrs. Plansky instead, but I will check.
Hopefully it'll be a trend towards senior plotters. Senior plotters.
All right, so Patrick, young Patrick, I forgot to bring up the giveaway book here, but if you'll tell me how many numbers there are, I will promise to limp into the back and get one. 1 through 19. So generally, when we get to this stage, I do like to thank you all for coming and give away an advanced reading copy. And I do have them scattered around the back room, but I forgot to bring one up here. So I will go get one, but let's determine a winner. And then while you're signing books, I will go and unearth one. So, but you pick a number between 1 and 19. Come on, you've done this before. Don't give me that
14.
during the headline thing.
14.
14. It's number 14 here. You have to look in your book. Ah, it's you. Oh, good. It is you. Wonderful. Thank you again for bringing the golden. So I will go and find you a suitable book and bring it forward. So please thank our author for coming this evening. Thank you, virtual audience, for joining us. And don't forget that because it's streaming, you can recommend the program to anybody watching Facebook or YouTube. And there'll be a podcast available too, so you can share this evening with people who didn't come. But I thank you for getting out of your dummies and coming down to the store tonight. It's really appreciated because it's so much fun for the author and me to actually see you. So at this point, if you